By sunrise, the river had stopped carrying boats. It was carrying bodies. They said the fever came in the night. No knock. No warning. Just heat in the blood and black foam on the lips. By morning, doors were nailed shut from the outside. Families vanished behind them. In the summer of 1833, along the Mississippi Delta, an entire town began to rot while still breathing. Church bells rang without hands. Doctors fled without notes. And in the slave quarters, one man kept walking into the sick houses and walking back out alive. His name was never written down correctly, and what he knew was buried on purpose. This is not a story about medicine. It's a story about control, and what happens when the wrong person saves too many lives. The town called itself Harrow's Bend. A bend in the river, a bend in the truth. White clapboard homes stood high on brick foundations, safe from floods. Below them, near the marsh, the slave quarters sank into mud that smelled like rust and sweet rot. Sunday mornings, the church was full. Sunday nights, the jail was fuller. People trusted two things here: God and doctors trained back east. When the fever arrived, both failed. It started small. A child coughing blood into a cotton sleeve. A preacher sweating through his sermon. Then livestock collapsing in the fields. Doctors said it was bad air. They burned tar. They rang bells. They cut veins and bled people dry. The death count rose anyway. And then whispers began. Not prayers. Not panic. Whispers. They're getting better down by the marsh. Someone's treating them. Someone they own. They called him Eli, though that wasn't the name his mother gave him. Eli was in his late 30s. Quiet. Straight-backed. Scarred hands. He worked as a coffin maker. That meant he saw the fever up close. He noticed things others didn't. That the sick who drank river water died faster. That certain plants made the vomiting stop. That heat killed quicker than cold. At night, Eli boiled roots and bark in iron pots behind the quarters. He mixed ash with honey. He made people drink until they slept. And they woke up. One by one. Families that were supposed to be dead weren't. Word spread faster than the fever ever had. And that's when the overseers noticed something worse than disease. Hope. The plantation owners did not thank Eli. They summoned the doctors. The doctors laughed. A slave can't cure what science can't, they said. He's imagining patterns. He's dangerous. But the numbers didn't lie. 300 people survived in the lower quarters. Fewer than 50 survived in the white district. That kind of truth doesn't sit quietly. So the story was changed. Records were rewritten. Deaths were recounted. Survivors were listed as never infected. Eli was ordered to stop. He didn't. So they moved him. Then they isolated him. Then, one morning, his tools were gone. His pot was broken. And his name disappeared from the plantation ledger. By the end of the year, Harrow's Bend said the fever had passed naturally. They rang the bells again. But some people never stopped listening. Because beneath the church floor, something had been sealed that was never meant to be found. The fever faded, but the church stayed open, day and night. Candles burned even when no service was called. Hymns were sung with no congregation. The pastor said it was gratitude. God had spared Harrow's Bend. But those who lived near the church heard other sounds after dark. Dragging. Wood scraping stone. Low voices counting numbers. Children were told not to play near the steps anymore. Mothers pulled them inside when the bells rang at odd hours. Something was happening beneath the floorboards. The church had a cellar no one talked about. Not officially. It had once stored grain. Later, bodies. During the fever, carts arrived at night. Too many to explain. And after Eli disappeared, the cellar door was sealed shut with new wood and fresh nails. The smell never fully left. 10 years later, a new clerk arrived from Natchez. Young, careful, curious. He was sent to organize old records. Births, deaths, property transfers. That's when he noticed the gaps. Entire weeks with no death entries during the height of the fever. Names crossed out so hard the paper tore. Ink that looked newer than the page. One name appeared again and again in the margins. Not listed, not counted, just written small. E. The clerk asked the pastor about it. The pastor closed the book and said some things were written only so God could read them. The orphan house sat behind the church. It filled quickly after the fever. Too quickly. Children with no listed parents. No birthplaces. No surnames. They were thin, quiet, and they didn't get sick. Other towns lost half their children to summer illness. Harrow's Bend lost almost none. The caretakers said it was prayer. Doctors said it was luck, but one visiting nurse noticed something strange. Every child drank the same bitter tea at night. Every cup prepared the same way. When she asked who taught them, the children gave the same answer. A man who isn't here anymore. The town elders met behind closed doors. They said the fever had proven something dangerous. That knowledge didn't always belong to the educated. That faith could be replaced by roots and dirt. That power could slip. So they made rules. No herbal treatments without approval. No gatherings after sundown. No teaching without church supervision. The orphan house became a school. The school became a place of forgetting. Children were taught new hymns. Old stories were punished. And any mention of Eli, his hands, his pots, his cures, was treated like blasphemy. But suppression leaves echoes. And the children, now grown, began to dream the same dream. A man standing in river fog, holding a bowl of dark liquid, saying nothing, just waiting. It started with one woman. She woke before dawn, heart racing, mouth tasting like iron. In her dream, she stood ankle-deep in river water. Fog wrapped around her knees like hands. A man stood across from her. He didn't move, didn't speak. He held a bowl. When she reached for it, she woke up screaming. Within weeks, others reported the same dream. Different ages, different homes, same river, same bowl, always the same man. The elders called it hysteria. The pastor called it temptation. Doctors blamed stress. But the dreams didn't feel random. They felt instructional. People woke remembering plants they'd never studied. Ratios, heat, timing. Old women began boiling roots again, quietly. Children stopped coughing. The fever didn't return. Something else did. In 1851, a storm flooded the church cellar. Water forced open boards that hadn't been touched in decades. What they found beneath the floor wasn't coffins. It was layers, bones stacked without order. Too many skulls for the recorded dead. Some with teeth stained black, charcoal. Some with hands bound. No markers. No names. Just one thing carved into a beam near the back wall. A single letter. E. The church sealed the cellar again before sunrise. They told the town it was animal remains. But people had seen human hands. And hands remember things. After the bones were found, people began to leave. Not all at once. One family at a time. No goodbyes. No notices. Homes left with tables set. Beds made. The orphan house emptied first. Children placed with families outside the county. Records sealed. The pastor aged rapidly. So did the doctors who had once laughed. They started sleeping with lights on. Because the dreams had changed. Now the man didn't wait. Now he walked closer. A final ledger surfaced years later. Hidden inside a wall during renovations. One page. No date. It described a containment decision. That Eli had refused to stop teaching. That his methods spread unsanctioned authority. That allowing him to live risked collapse. They didn't kill him publicly. They couldn't. Instead, they buried him beneath the church. Alive or dead, the record didn't say. They believed proximity to holiness would silence him. They were wrong. You can suppress a man. You can't suppress what he gives away. Power doesn't vanish loudly. It erodes. By the 1870s, Harrow's Bend was smaller. Quieter. Too quiet for a river town. The church still stood, but attendance thinned. People prayed at home now. Some didn't pray at all. What unsettled the elders wasn't rebellion. It was independence. People treated fevers without calling doctors. Women shared remedies in whispers. Men healed burns and infections with methods that weren't taught anywhere official. And they all claimed the same thing. I just knew what to do. Knowledge was surfacing without permission. And the dreams were no longer limited to those born in town. Travelers had them too. Her name was Martha Bell. She was 16, an orphan, born long after the fever. She began dreaming of the river every night. But unlike the others, she listened. In her dreams, the man spoke, not with words, but with sensations. Heat meant danger. Bitterness meant safety. Silence meant wait. She started testing things. On animals first, then people. She saved a man crushed by farm equipment. Stopped an infection that should have killed a child. Word spread fast. Too fast. The church summoned her. They asked where she learned these things. She said, "Someone showed me." They asked who. She said, "You buried him." The following Sunday, the church was full for the first time in years. The pastor preached about false prophets. About knowledge that didn't come from God. About obedience. Martha stood up mid-sermon. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't angry. She said, calmly, that the fever never left, that it was only waiting, that Eli didn't cure people to gain power. He cured them because no one else would. Silence fell. Then screaming. Martha disappeared that night. Some say she was sent away. Some say she fled. No record confirms either. But the dream stopped for a while, and that frightened people more than the dreams ever had. Harrow's Bend didn't burn. It didn't flood. It just thinned. Businesses closed. Families moved upriver. By 1900, the church stood empty. The orphan house collapsed into vines. And beneath the church floor, the earth shifted. Graves sink when they're disturbed. Whatever had been buried, there wasn't content to stay contained. Because knowledge, once planted, grows roots. In 1932, the river changed course. Flooding exposed parts of Harrow's Bend that had been untouched for decades. Foundations cracked. Graves surfaced. A state survey team arrived to assess damage. They didn't expect to find anything worth noting, until one worker struck wood beneath the ruined church. Not a coffin, a box. Inside were jars sealed with wax, powdered bark, dried roots, charcoal wrapped in cloth, and a notebook, not written in proper script, not taught handwriting, but precise. Every page described symptoms, timings, what worked, what killed. 300 names were listed, not the dead, the saved. The notebook ended with one sentence. They will try to forget this, because it proves they didn't have to let us die. The cure was simple, too simple. No miracle, no divine intervention, just observation, patience, care. The fever thrived in heat, filth, and panic. Eli removed all three. He cooled bodies. He cleaned wounds. He gave people rest when doctors bled them dry. If that truth became public, it would expose something unbearable. That hundreds died not from ignorance, but from pride. That slavery didn't just steal labor. It stole knowledge. So the cure was buried with the man. And medicine moved on without ever looking back. Harrow's Bend no longer exists. The river swallowed its last trace by the 1950s. But locals still avoid that stretch of water. Fishermen say the fog there feels heavier, quieter. Some report dreams when they camp nearby. A man in the mist, holding a bowl. He never forces it into their hands. He waits. Because Eli never wanted obedience. He wanted survival. And survival, once learned, can't be erased. History didn't forget Eli by accident. It erased him on purpose. Because his existence proves something dangerous. That institutions will destroy what they can't control. That healing doesn't always come from authority. That sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't a plague. It's the proof that suffering was unnecessary. 300 people lived. A town collapsed. And a secret was buried beneath a church so no one would ask the wrong question. How many others could have been saved if they had listened to the one voice they decided didn't matter?